everybody. Welcome back to Bellingrath Gardens and Home. Pleased to have you all here for our Winter Wednesdays program. We have an exciting program here that Dr. Gary is going to be giving. I want to go over a few housekeeping notes, though, as always, before we get started. So I'm Todd Lassang, Executive Director of Bellingrath Gardens and Home. So if you have any praises to sing about Bellingrath, please come talk to me. If you have any complaints, please see my associates and they'll handle that for you. So, right? This is our second to last Winter Wednesday, and I was really thrilled when I was working to identify our speakers that I was able to get Gary to tell me yes, that he would come on over from Biloxi. Gary's kind of a icon down here in these deep south parts that I haven't lived in for 30 years, you know, and so he really understands the pulse of the industry and the consumer down here much more than I do, and I think you're going to enjoy his tale. He's going to tell us, but some of the particulars. So Gary is the Extension / Research Professor of Horticulture at the Coastal Research and Extension Center for Mississippi State University in Biloxi. He also hosts the award-winning Southern Gardening TV series produced by Mississippi State Cooperative Extension, and he does all the rounds on all the media outlets, you know, radio and TV and all, and he's a fixture down here. Prior to being in Mississippi, Gary had worked both for Tennessee Tech University and also Illinois State University, but he's been living here in Southern Mississippi and Ocean Springs for how long now, Gary?
14 years now.
14 years. That counts as a good tenure. So you're not just someone who came down for the winter.
Right.
You've actually been here and you've stayed. You've survived the summers. Okay. And he and his wife have operated their urban homestead, which is called Heritage Cottage. I can't talk today. Heritage Cottage Urban Nano Farm. And it's pretty fascinating what they've done over there. We were just talking about radishes, believe it or not. So, but anyhow, I want y'all to welcome Dr. Gary. Next week, I'll be the closeout speaker. I'll be talking about Japanese horticulture. And in the meantime, we're going to have Gary entertain us today. And afterwards, he will be available for a book signing for his brand new book that's just come out hot off the presses, which we have for sale up in the gift shop. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Gary Bachman.
Thanks, Todd, for the warm welcome. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. I have to say one thing. I think, Todd, we've been around in circles for like 100 years.
Right.
And I seem to remember at times he and I introducing ourselves at various meetings for presentations. So this is kind of like, it's like coming back home. Yeah, coming full circle. So I appreciate that. Today we're going to talk about a project, not a research project. We're not going to talk about a whole bunch of plants. We're going to talk about a radish. And you have to think, why a radish? I'm an ornamental horticulturist. I'm a urban homesteader in my private life, and I grow a lot of vegetables. But looking for a radish, and so we're going to talk about that. As far as what I do with Mississippi State Extension, I have a 90% extension appointment. It's primarily the Southern Gardening plant promotion for MSU Extension. As Todd says, that's the newspaper, TV, social media. We don't do radio anymore. We could never get any metrics as how effective we were because the radio stations wouldn't tell us their listenership. It was either they're all competitive or they don't have very many listeners. So I'm not quite sure what they were doing with that. My research is 10%, and I work on local foods, small scale gardening, urban farming. So that's kind of fun to me. As far as Southern gardening goes, I'm just going to show you some gaudy numbers because I'm just going to shameless self-promotion here. We do TV 52 segments a year. We have about 450,000 viewers a week, and that's based off of our Farm Week. We're part of Farm Week, which has been a Mississippi State production for almost 40 years now. Newspaper, 52 columns a year. We look at subscriptions. we're over 2.3 million potential readers a week on my column. So that's pretty good. And then we do the social media. We'll talk about social media at the end. So what do? I'm an extension agent, okay? Yeah, I'm a faculty member, but I am an extension agent. And we are problem solvers. And I like to look at it as kind of like horticulture CSI. You know, we go through and we look at the problems, we interview people in the ideal situation. Most of the time, people come to us with their hair on fire and they want an answer right now. And so, yeah, so Webb is putting out fires, right? But what we're going to talk about today is one of these projects that have taken me a while to develop. And this tale starts in 2009. I was asked to speak at the Long Beach, Mississippi Radish Festival. And I'm like, Radish Festival? And so talking to people, and the consensus was, yeah, evidently we grew radishes in Long Beach sometime way back when. And so that got me kind of interested. This is like a treasure hunt now, right? Got to look through the data, and it's almost but not quite like, oh, guy, you know, we're chasing a story through history, okay? But I'm going to tell you something. We actually have more results than those guys do, and we don't have to use the big heavy equipment. But what we really found out by just starting to dig in the literature was, yeah, Long Beach was known for radishes. Here's Seacoast Echo. This is from Waveland, Mississippi, just to the west of Long Beach on the coast. And they said that in 1909, Long Beach was known as Radish Town. Okay, so it was in a paper 100 years ago, so it must be true, right? There's historical markers around town that talk about Long Beach growing this radish that was called the Long Beach Red. Okay, so we're getting closer. Maybe something's there. And even in some of the signage for Long Beach, Mississippi, they have radishes on the sign. So do they grow radishes there now? No. Haven't for a long time. And so what we started to do was, I'm with Extension, so I wanted to go back to the archives, okay? And just like Indiana Jones, I couldn't find anything there, primarily because Extension was established in 1914. And so we're looking before that, so we don't have any stored data that we can find. So, you know, it's like, where do you look? Well, we found a history of Long Beach, Mississippi called Rosalie and Radishes. And so in this book, they talk about the history of radish growing and truck farming in Long Beach, Mississippi. And you want to say, why Long Beach? Well, Long Beach is on the coast just west of Gulfport, between Biloxi, Gulfport, and New Orleans. And what happened was the Louisville and Nashville Railroad bought this line, the New Orleans to Mobile line. And what that did, that enabled this area in South Mississippi that was logged out and was becoming more favorable for producing vegetables, truck farming. It gave that area access to the northern markets up in the Nashville, Louisville, St. Louis, Cincinnati, and the like. So you get up into the heart of the country with product. So the Long Beach Red Radish. It was a 6 to 7 inch long red radish. Kind of looked like a red carrot.
Yeah.
It was been described as crisp, brittle, glass-like. We're going to come back to this glass reference later on. And the seed was shipped south, and then the radishes were shipped north in the wintertime. So that was the market for these radishes. And this is just a shot of one of the radish packing sheds at the time. And what was really interesting, Long Beach, Mississippi in that 1900, 1910 range was advertised as one of these, if you want to call them, opportunities that you could invest in, you know, get rich quick kind of things. Yeah, and this is from a magazine, North and South, in 1905. You've heard of Long Beach, haven't you? Well, this is the second largest radish and truck farming area in the country. And Mr. Joseph Smith said at the time that you can make $200 an acre growing anything that you want in Long Beach. Think about that. Hey, that's big money right now, right? And then this is just a, you know, this is hard to see in this light, but this is a gentleman farmer, and that's a radish that he's holding. That radish must be about a 5-pounder. Okay, that was part of the advertising. So, Long Beach Red Radish, seed shipped south, product shipped north. What for? Bar snacks. Not peanuts and pretzels. They were shipped to the bars and saloons and consumed with beer.
Wow.
I've tried it. I don't get the allure to it, but back then it was the thing. The production peaked in 1921 with 300 boxcars of radishes. It's a lot of, people were drinking a lot of beer. But in this time frame, the radish disappeared. And what happened? Why did we lose this radish? Well, Prohibition. When did that go into effect? 1920. And all of a sudden, there's no market for the radish, so nobody's growing it. There was also business considerations, more favorable growing and marketing from Florida and Texas, and also consumer preference changed. People wanted the round radish we see now more for salads and not the long radish that those beer drinkers ate, you know. So with that, the Long Beach radish just disappeared until we had a break in the case. And this is on the right there, that's Ron Wilson. He hosts a national radio show, In the Garden with Ron Wilson, 55 KRC on iHeart. I'm a frequent caller and guest on that. And he was talking to this lady, Kate Cook, who runs a fantastic farm-to-table organic operation outside of Cincinnati. And they were talking about radishes one day, and I was listening to it. And Ron was talking about one of his favorite radishes. It was called Cincinnati Market. And he was describing it. It's about a 6 to 7 inch long red radish that's really crisp. And this is like 2015, okay? So I've been the trail was dead for 6 years. And all of a sudden I hear this, and it's like, wow, I think I've heard of this before. And so he put me in touch with the folks that he buys the seed from, Circa Plants, out of Cincinnati. And they're an heirloom seed house. They deal with just all strictly heirloom seeds. And Cincinnati Market Radish was a radish that was bred by the glass gardeners outside of Cincinnati in the mid-1800s, described as crisp, red, long, seed shipped south, radishes shipped north in the wintertime. I'm like, got it. Not quite. I always thought that Glass Gardeners was a grower. So I'm looking through the archives, there's nobody called Glass Gardeners. Well, Glass Gardeners were around every metropolitan city back in the mid-1800s growing vegetables under glass to be shipped into the city. Collectively, they were called Glass Gardeners. And so Glass Gardeners were all over the country. Wherever there was a big city, we had greenhouse growers growing vegetables for the populace. So that's okay. That doesn't really help me, but it explained who Glass Gardeners was. And we can still find Cincinnati Market Radish. This is Seed Savers, Circa Plants, any of the folks that carry heirloom seeds, you can get Cincinnati Market Radish. Got a call in 2019. I was given a talk describing this project to our national ASHS meetings, and got a call from this Jeremy Churfus. And he has this podcast called Eat This Podcast. And he wanted to talk, he thought it was fascinating, the news release that ASH just did on my talk. And it's like, I don't know why they picked this. I mean, it's just a radish talk, you know. But he wanted to talk about it. So we had a half-hour conversation. But I love this, that my search holds all the intrigue of a murder mystery and all the painstaking, arduous pursuit of an archaeological dig, along with a touch of serendipity. So, I mean, I like this guy already. Well, he put me in contact with a organization, National Center for Genetic Resources Preservation. They look at old varieties of plants, vegetables in particular, and try to keep track of naming. Because we're in a, let me just say, we're in a common name situation here. And that will, Todd, you know, dealing with common names, you just don't know where you're going, what people are talking about. Well, they had some information on Cincinnati market radish that was also called long scarlet. So now all of a sudden I'm thinking, Cincinnati market may not be the radish, maybe there's a bunch of radishes that were long red at the time. So we can look at Rare Seeds, Baker's Creek, they sold long scarlet. They didn't sell Cincinnati market. You look at the pictures, they look pretty close to me. Then we got into contact with Sven Solberg with the Nordic Gene Bank and World Vegetable Center, talking about the problems of identifying old vegetables. You could have one variety with two different common names, or two varieties with the same common name. So how do you tell the difference? And just to muddy the water a little bit, way back in the 1800s, and they still do it nowadays, seed houses would buy seed and then change the name and give it their own name to differentiate it from whoever they bought the seed from. Is that legal? I guess it's legal. It's marketing, right? And so we can look at an example. This is Card Seed Company in 1915. They had one that was called Early Long Scarlet Short Top. Now I'm going to tell you this right now. We're going to be dealing with word salad here with about 10 different descriptive words. Okay? I'm just warning you, because I'm going to mess up the names because they're all messed up. But in 1930, they had long scarlet short top. You know, you look at the packs, yeah, the radishes look different, but these are hand drawings. So are they really different? I don't know. Then I got into the databases. The databases are fascinating. USDA has the Henry Gilbert Nursery and Seed Trade Catalog Collection. And I've gone back into catalogs as far as 1834 looking for these long red radishes. And they go back that far and farther. Here, like the Plant Seed Company, 1886, early short top long scarlet, standard sort grown, but private gardens and for market. Okay. Then they have in 1893, Market Gardeners early long scarlet short top, and we'll just get to the bottom, commands a higher price than any of the other long scarlets. Okay, so we've got a bunch of them happening here. Tate Seed Company, 1903. Long scarlet, short top early. The kind grown in Norfolk, Virginia, shipped to the northern markets. And then in Tate's 1937 Cincinnati market, this fine strain of long scarlet. And then it's glass-like texture, often called glass radish. Is that reference back to glass gardeners? I think so. I'd like to think so. And then we look at Mall's Seed Book in 1918. They have Mall's Improved Long Scarlet Short Top. Very best, long, brittle, brightest scarlet radish. Sounds pretty good. But they also have in 1918 Cincinnati market, almost identical to our long scarlet. Who knows what people are thinking about? We can see some other evidence as far as multiple varieties of long scarlet radishes. Seacoast Deco again, 1916. These are all articles geared towards the home gardener, but these are the radishes that were being grown. Early long scarlet in Cincinnati are desirable. We can see in Starkville News in 1917, Cincinnati market is excellent. Brookhaven Leader, 1922. any of the long scarlet radishes. So we're looking at that. And then let's, since we're going down the rabbit hole here, let's look at Peter Rabbit and Beatrix Potter. And, just to tell a little story, Peter was a bad rabbit. Mrs. Rabbit said, I'm going out, but don't you go to Mr. McGregor's garden. So what does Peter do? He goes squeezes under the garden gate. He ate some lettuces, some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. See, now, I read these stories to my kids when they were little, and I probably read radishes, but I saw carrots. When my kids were little, I didn't know I was a horticulturist, let's just put it that way. And so I'm looking at this going, oh my gosh, this was back, and this is 1902. So it's kind of interesting. So what's in a common name? Everybody bear with me here. In 1834, early short top scarlet. 1835, Cincinnati glass. 1852, early scarlet short top. We got London particular long scarlet, Beck's long scarlet, Cincinnati market, early short top long scarlet, Market Gardener's early long scarlet short top. You're all writing this down, right? Market Gardener's early long scarlet short top early long scarlet short top, Mall's improved long scarlet short top, long scarlet Cincinnati. No wonder it's confusing. But what's interesting about this is the reference to Cincinnati 3 times in these radishes over a 100-year period. So I really think these radishes were developed in the Cincinnati area. I really believe that Cincinnati market is probably maybe the radish, but others were being grown at the time because they were similar. So when we look at this, there's one more that popped up in my research. Bartender Mammoth is an heirloom variety that dates back to 1935. Now, why would a radish with bartender in the name pop up in 1935? Prohibition ended in 1933. So all of a sudden people are drinking beer, they're in the saloons, they need something to snack on. So all of a sudden here comes the long red radish back. So I think that's just kind of fun. So if I found it, I don't know, what do you think? To me, yeah, we found something similar. It looks like it. It quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, And I think it's okay. Because when we think about growing these heirloom type vegetables, gardeners, people want to know where, veggies come from. And, really hardcore gardeners, they want to know the story. And they want to grow the story of these radishes. Because when your neighbors come over, you can go, hey, you want to go see my Long Beach Red Radishes? Let me tell you about it. Because I heard all this from Dr. Gary, and he's an authority on this, and this is the way it is. So that's kind of where we're at, and I just think it's a neat little story to tell. Now, who's all on social media? Now, I do have to tell you, this is a much better group than talking to a bunch of academics when you're giving talks, because you can look out at a bunch of academics and they're all like this when you're talking to them. And so I didn't see anybody on your phone while I was up here, so I thank you very much. But anyway, from a social media standpoint, if you want to follow Southern Gardening, which is all ornamental plants, it's what we do in the ornamental plant promotion for MSU, Southern Gardening. If you want to follow my personal, I don't do anything boring. I do flowers, food, and booze, and travel, okay? Not necessarily in that order. And then if you want to follow what we do at the farm, it's Heritage Cottage. And we keep up to date what we do at our Urban Nano Farm. Twitter, I don't do anything on Twitter. I have a social media specialist on campus that basically handles all the university stuff. And then at So Gardening and Real Gary Bachman, I don't think that's active anymore. And then Instagram, Southern Gardening. We're all on YouTube with all the videos and stuff. We also do, and we started during the pandemic, doing daily dose of hort videos. And primarily it was, we were all stuck at home, and I was getting all these questions from gardeners, and I was working from home, and so my wife says, well, why don't we shoot videos in the yard of just you gardening? And just me, just tips and tricks, and just to show people, I'm just a normal gardener, just like everybody else. I mess stuff up, I kill a whole bunch of stuff in my yard. But it's an opportunity to grow something else. And we've been doing that. We started doing Ask Me Anything, Facebook Live, Q&As. We'll start that up again. I think we're scheduled to start again in March, but those have been fun. And I'm really excited about the Southern Gardening book, Southern Gardening All Year Long, which is here. We can, available to purchase. I'll even sign it for you, no charge. But it was a fun project, and it's not an encyclopedic book of here's what you need to plant in your yard and give you 500 different plants. It's a series of 52 essays of just what I think are cool, kind of in the seasons, and it's a book of encouragement is what it is, just to give you ideas to do in the garden and landscape. So I think it was fun. It was about a 3-year project for us to get it to this point. So I'm really happy. I'm really excited about that. And with that, I can leave the QR code if you want to evaluate me. I'm open to questions. If you want to ask questions, I said earlier to a group that this is the time that we can play the game Stump Gary. And so fire away. Anything you want. Well, anything within reason. Yes, ma'am.
Did truck farming in Long Beach essentially end at the beginning of the prohibition, or did it continue?
The question was, did truck farming end at the beginning of prohibition? No, but it was phasing out at the time. The primary crop was the radish. Really too hot in the summertime for truck farming, so it was basically a winter crop growing region. And once that radish left, Long Beach just did not maintain that truck crop designation. So, yes, sir.
So, did you go back further in the history of radishes and kind of, who was the first one to stumble over it and start using it?
Question is, have I gone farther back to find like who found the red radish? Or no, I haven't gone that far back. I was just looking for this particular tied to this region. But those long radishes, that was that was the first radish. The first radishes were those long radishes. And those round radishes came through selection later. Yes, ma'am.
When did you get seeds from?
Okay, and you would think that I kind of planted this question. I have Bartender Mammoth seeds. I have Cincinnati Market seeds here. I brought 30 packs of each. I don't know if I've got enough for everybody, but if you want radishes and you don't get any here, I'll give you an address and you can send me a self-addressed stamped envelope and I'll send you radish seed. How about that? Now, go. Okay.
Maybe we could have these available for our beer festival, wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
oh, I think so.
That'd be a hit.
Absolutely.
Awesome
Yes, sir.
idea.
Nothing to do with the long radish.
Okay.
When I go back to my childhood, that goes back a pretty good distance. They were all round. They were hotter than hell. Today you bite into a radish and it's very mild, very tasty. Was that an intentional thing to evolve the radish, or did it just happen with pollution and whatever else?
have radish, started off hot, now they're all mild. Why is that? That's strictly selection. People will like the milder radish more. You can still buy varieties that are hot, but a lot that you buy now are that mild because they've been selected for that mild taste. So. That's it. Well, oh, in the back there.
What can you tell us about watermelon radishes?
Okay, question is, what can I tell you about watermelon radishes? Watermelon radishes, it's a bigger radish, probably the size of a $50, maybe bigger than that. And it's kind of the rage in cooking circles because you slice into it, it's white on the outside and it'll be reddish pink on the inside. I'm trying to think. Baker's Creek has had them in the past. You can find them in the heirloom catalogs, but they're about a 55 to 60 day radish. Most of our radishes are in that 28 to 35 days. You have to wait a long time for that watermelon radish, and it'll look like it's just sitting there. And then after about 45 days, the radish starts to get bigger. But we grew those when we were market growers, and they just take forever, and you have to be patient. I don't know how many I pulled up prematurely because I just couldn't stand it anymore. There's got to be a radish here, darn it.
What's the history of horseradish?
Well, horseradish isn't a radish. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the history of horseradish. Sorry about that.
Is it a horse?
I'm looking to Todd for some help here. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, over here and I'll come back.
What can you tell me about French breakfast radishes then?
Okay, French breakfast radish is a little long radish. They're only about inch, maybe inch and a half long. Red on top, white on the bottom. They're delicious.
I was just curious, you said that the watermelon radish was bitter,
It's hot.
hot?
Yeah, watermelon radish, I think, has a hot taste to it.
Okay. No, that makes sense. How big is it? No.
Well, it's probably the size of a $50, maybe even a silver dollar in diameter.
Round.
It's a round radish, yeah.
We have some dissension back there.
Uh-oh. What, did I say something wrong?
Well, at a place where we eat all the time, they would put a big watermelon radish on the salad, and I loved them. They
Okay.
were not hot,
Okay.
and it was really
Hot,
pretty.
not hot. It's, we're all okay with that. It could,
Sour sweet.
It could be a different variety.
right, and it could be grown in cooler weather. Hotter weather will make radishes hotter as you get more into the heat of the summer. So,
If you want to expand into cabbage, between here and Highway 90 was one huge truck farming operation for cabbage.
okay,
Back in the day, it was one of the largest in the south.
really?
What was that? What was that?
Coming down Bellingrath Road on both sides of the road, that was all cabbage truck farming operation. And Pritchard, Alabama was originally a key. Mr. Pritchard had a truck farming operation there.
Okay.
At a railroad stop.
Okay,
It was
yeah,
all connected to the railroad.
absolutely, it was all, you had to move the product.
They didn't have FedEx.
They didn't have that, yeah.
And I wanted to say also that when you're talking about those glass houses, it's interesting, things like celery and different things were extremely exotic and very, very expensive because and lettuce were just off the charts price-wise because they were grown in such small quantities. So when you went into the truck farming operations in the 19th century, you start seeing those things become much more commonplace.
Right, exactly.
The history of salad, I love it.
Yeah, lettuce is exotic. So is celery.
Gary, if there's no more radish questions, it's great we've had so many radish
Yes.
questions. Could you expound maybe I'm thinking two things that would be interesting. One, you've been in ornamental horticulture for a long time, and you've been a good number of years here in the South in ornamental culture. So I'm curious to see what changes you've seen
And then secondly, I'm curious to see what you've seen with COVID, your observations of COVID's impact on the broader horticulture industry from southern Mississippi.
Okay. Let's just go with the impact of COVID. That's the easiest one. When we got into this 2020, all of a sudden everybody was at home, and if anybody's working from home that's like me, I can't work from home. I mean, there's too many shiny things. Seriously, my wife is retired. I drove her nuts. She was waiting for me to go back to the office. She got a kind of a preview of when I retire, what it's going to be like. But what happened? All of a sudden, people were working their 2 hours, counting it for 8, and looking for something else to do. They streamed Netflix with all the shows that they could watch. And all of a sudden they went out into the yard and it's like, oh my gosh, here's something we can do. And the National Initiative for Consumer Horticulture, NICH, is a consumer horticulture group I'm involved with. Through their survey work, we gained 19 million new gardeners in 2020. All these new gardeners made rushes on the garden centers. In Mississippi, and I'm sorry, I don't know about Alabama, but in Mississippi, the garden centers were deemed essential. So they could stay open because they were selling food crops, materials for food crops. And the garden centers couldn't keep up. They couldn't get enough plants in, supplies in to meet the demand. So if you weren't at the garden center early in the pandemic, you didn't get some of the materials. And questions I had from people were emailing, well, why don't they just grow more of whatever? Well, it's not as, growing a crop of plants is not like making widgets in a factory where you can turn the speed dial up on the widget factory and make more. You need square footage. The growers weren't prepared for that. And so they did the best they could. In 2021, we kept, by low estimates, 80% of those new gardeners. And we still saw those runs on all the materials. A lot of the nursery growers were selling crops 6 months early than they normally would have because they could. So if it was a 12-month crop production time for, let's just say an azalea or a rose, they were selling them at 9 months because they barely had enough of a root system in a pot that they could sell it. Then they could start the cycle over again. And still can't keep up with the demand. I think we're going to see not quite as heavy demand this year, but I talked to our independents over my way, and they haven't seen the demand go down yet. So we'll see what happens once we get into summer. Spring is always going to be a demand year, or a demand time of the year. But we just saw more people gardening. It's fantastic, and that's kind of the short answer about what happened during COVID. We got a lot more gardening friends out there now, so that was a good thing for it. The other question, what have I seen change? Really, and I can talk in the 14 years I've been in the Deep South here. More people wanting to grow vegetables, and even before COVID, the new gardeners wanting to grow vegetables. Nobody wants to start out gardening and say, I want to grow encore azaleas. And nobody says that. But a new gardener wants to grow a tomato. That's what they want to grow. And I call tomatoes the gateway drug to gardening. Because if I can help somebody be successful with one tomato plant, then next year they're going to grow 3 tomato plants. The year after that, they're going to maybe grow some lettuce, maybe grow some peppers. And then by year 5, then they're going to start buying encore azaleas. But you got to get them hooked. And I'm like that guy in the corner, okay? So we see that. We see a lot more people wanting to container garden. I'm a committed container gardener. I I don't have anything in the ground. Oh, wait, I have a Vermillionaire Cupvia by my mailbox out in my house strip. That's the only thing I have in ground. But we see that. We see people, and this is not anything new, but we see folks that want something that's low or no maintenance. That interest is still there, and color 12 months out of the year. There's got to be something like that, right, Gary? And no, there really isn't anything like that. Seeing more interest in dwarf plants. Now, you were talking about some of the plants that you saw in Japan. We're seeing people that want smaller stature plants. And this last year, talking about smaller stature plants, this last year in 2021, I grew micro tomatoes. They only got this big and loaded with cherry tomatoes. They had as much production as some of my big plants did in these little tiny plants. It's fascinating. I'm growing them again this year. I'm growing more of them this year. You know, people want butterfly plants or plants to attract pollinators. That's a biggie. So so the demand there, not just your milkweeds, but what kind of annuals can we plant? So we can have forage and nectar sources through the spring to fall. Fruit, citrus. A lot of people are wanting to grow citrus now. Citrus is fun. I grew up in Michigan, and I just thought it was really cool when we would bring a box of oranges when we drove to Florida back in the 60s. Like a 4-day trip from Detroit to Florida, driving then. But now I think it's so cool. I'm growing mandarins and grapefruit, and satsumas and kumquats. I've got I got a lime quat, which is a cross between the key lime and a kumquat. I've got a Australian finger lime that hasn't fruited yet, but it's growing. Yes, so just fun stuff like that, and learning how to grow citrus. Again, I grow in all containers, so I can help people, if they don't want to put things in the ground. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's give Gary a round of applause.
Thank you.